The Ember Chronicles Part 16 of the Galactic War Saga. Ashes of Eternity. Chapter 1. When the Veil Breaks. The air burned like it had been set aflame, though no fire could be seen. It was the taste of charged metal, the scent of ozone tearing through the atmosphere, and the weight of something ancient pressing against every breath. The ground trembled beneath their boots, as if the world itself was trying to recoil from what had arrived. Shattered fragments of the veil still hung in the air like dying embers, drifting in and out of existence. Each one shimmered with a color the human eye wasn't meant to comprehend, bending light into impossible shapes. And through those jagged rents in reality, something looked back. It wasn't one thing. It was many. Faces that weren't faces, movements that weren't bound by direction, shapes that shifted in defiance of form. The entity had no single body. Its presence was everywhere, sliding along the edges of perception, whispering through the marrow of bone. Commander Kaelin's muscles screamed to move, but the veil's lingering distortion slowed every heartbeat to an agonizing crawl. His eyes darted to where Captain Yara stood, her figure silhouetted by the glimmering fracture in the sky. She was rigid, breath shallow, eyes fixed on what was coming through. A ripple in the air became a hand, or something like it, stretching outward, its fingers longer than shadows, tipped with points sharp enough to pierce thought itself. The ground split where it touched, not from weight, but from a corruption that unraveled matter at its most basic weave. They had seen horrors before. They had faced fleets that blotted out suns, storms that could tear a planet's crust apart, and the waking gods of the Ascendants. But this was different. This was not merely the enemy beyond the veil. It was the reason the veil had been built in the first place. The hum became a roar, vibrating through armor, shattering comms, making teeth ache. Kaelin could feel the memories of places he'd never been clawing into his mind. Cities of glass drowning in starlight, oceans boiling into vapor, and endless fields of bodies turned to crystal. It was not a vision. It was a promise. Somewhere behind him, an explosion ripped through the remains of the western ridge. The shockwave broke whatever strange grip the veil's remnants had on their bodies. The world snapped into motion all at once, shouts, weapons fire, the groan of rupturing stone. Yara's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and final, ordering the retreat. But even as Kaelin turned, he knew the truth. There was no retreat from something that could reach through the gaps in reality. A surge of impossible wind pulled toward the fracture. Rocks, dust, and fragments of destroyed armor were dragged upward, vanishing into that shimmering wound in the sky. And then, with a single pulse like the heartbeat of a dying star, the gap widened. The entity stepped forward. Not through space, but through the rules that govern space, bending them as easily as a blade of grass. Kaelin didn't see the world after that. He saw only light, blinding, searing, followed by the sound of a single word etched into the air. It was not spoken, but known, pressed into his mind with the weight of inevitability. His vision cleared just enough to see Yara standing her ground, her silhouette dwarfed by the shape before them. Her weapon was raised, but even she seemed to know it wouldn't matter. The stars themselves seemed to dim as the thing in the fracture leaned closer. The battle for survival had already begun, and they were already losing. Chapter 2. Shadows Written in Fire. The ash was still falling, carried by currents that no longer obeyed the winds of the living world. Each flake glowed faintly, as if it remembered the heat that birthed it. The air itself seemed fractured, split between the cold breath of reality and the burning exhale of something older, deeper, and far less merciful. Astra moved through the ruined city with the deliberate pace of someone who knew speed would not save them. Every step crunched on glass, char, and what was left of the proud structures that had once scraped the heavens. Above her, the sky was a swirl of black and crimson, torn open in seams that refused to heal. Through those jagged tears, shapes shifted, long, spine silhouettes that moved like predators on the edge of sight. They were watching, waiting, learning. The others followed behind in a ragged line, their boots leaving trails in the ash. No one spoke. Words would be useless here. Ahead, The old plaza had collapsed inward, forming a basin where molten light pooled at its heart. The ground seemed to pulse, as if the city had been turned into a living wound. Astra's eyes narrowed. The last time she had seen such a thing, it had been on a nameless world in the far rim, where the Leviathan shadow had swallowed an entire ocean. But this felt different, hungrier. She stepped to the edge, letting the heat wash over her face. The molten light reflected in her eyes, and she realized it wasn't fire, it was memory. Scenes moved within the glow. The council chambers aflame, the towers falling, the moment the veil tore open and screamed into the stars. Her pulse quickened. This was not just the past. The visions were shifting, bending forward in time. A battlefield she did not recognize. Two armies converging beneath a broken star. And at the center, a figure cloaked in shadow, holding something that bled light in waves so strong it split the ground beneath their feet. She took a step closer, and the molten memory seemed to notice her. The vision sharpened. The shadowed figure turned its head slowly toward her, though it should not have been possible for anything within to see her. And yet, it smiled. Astra recoiled, stumbling back, and the molten pool boiled with sudden violence. Something was trying to push through. The ground split, and a column of fire shot upward, tearing through the air. The others staggered back, shielding their eyes, but Astra held her ground. The fire formed a shape. Human at first, then something else entirely, its limbs too long, its movements too deliberate. The voice came without sound, vibrating through her bones. "We have seen what you will become." Her breath caught. The pool shuddered again, showing her another vision, different this time. The galaxy burning, whole fleets swallowed in darkness. And then, far ahead in time, she stood alone at the mouth of a shattered gate, something vast moving toward her from the other side. The fire collapsed in on itself, leaving the basin dark and steaming. Astra staggered back, her skin pale and cold despite the heat. Kael came up beside her, his eyes scanning the empty basin. "What was that?" he asked, though it was more an instinct than a real question. Astra didn't answer. She turned her gaze upward. The shapes beyond the tears in the sky were closer now, watching more intently. From a far edge of the plaza came a deep, resonant hum. The others turned as a structure rose from the ash, a tower that had not been there moments ago. It rose impossibly fast, its surface marked with runes that shimmered like molten steel. Astra recognized them. They were the same inscriptions carved into the relics of the Ascendants, symbols of binding, protection, and in some cases, release. This one was not built to protect. The air around them warped, bending light into unnatural curves. Each rune began to pulse in time with the heartbeat of something massive and unseen. Kael reached for his weapon. The hum grew louder. Then, without warning, a ring of fire erupted from the tower's base, sweeping outward in a perfect circle. Where it passed, the ground turned to black glass. The heat was unbearable, but worse was the whisper riding on the wave, a voice in a language none of them knew, yet all understood. It spoke of a name that would soon be remembered, a name that would end wars by ending the need for life to wage them. And as the sound faded, Astra realized something that froze her blood. The voice had not been warning them. It had been welcoming them. Chapter 3. The Name That Burns. The glass still smoked where the ring of fire had passed, spiderweb cracks radiating outward like the veins of some blackened heart. The heat shimmer hung in the air, bending light and distorting the world into a restless mirage. Astra felt her breath catch, not because of the fire, but because the whisper still lingered in her mind, echoing like it had been carved into the marrow of her bones. The name had been clear, though none of them had ever heard it before. Yet in hearing it, she knew it could not be forgotten. Every syllable burned with a weight that was more than sound. It was intent. Kael stepped forward, boots crunching the brittle glass, his eyes fixed on the newly risen tower. The runes still pulsed, now slower, like a sleeping creature inhaling and exhaling through the stone. The air inside the ring of glass was colder than outside, despite the fact that it had been seared moments ago. The shift in temperature was unnatural, the kind that made instinct scream to turn back. The others lingered at the edge, unwilling to cross. Astra crossed anyway. Each step forward seemed to push against something invisible, like walking into a tide that resisted her. She could feel the hum of the tower in her teeth, in her pulse. Her hand hovered over the inscriptions, the heat of them prickling her skin without touching. The symbols seemed to shift under her gaze, not just glowing, but changing, rewriting themselves with each heartbeat. A low vibration traveled through the ground. Something beneath the glass was moving. A crack formed at her feet, thin as a hairline fracture, but radiating with pale light. The others noticed, weapons ready, but Astra raised a hand to stop them. The light wasn't just illumination, it was memory. It poured upward like mist, and as it swirled around her, the images formed. A battlefield again, but not the one from the molten pool. This one was worse. Darker. The sky was entirely gone, replaced by a cold expanse of nothingness. Cities floated like corpses in the void. And there she was, not as she stood now, but older, her armor scored and blackened, her eyes carrying the weight of too many endings. She was alone, holding something in her hand. It was small, no larger than a blade's hilt, but it pulsed like a living star. And from the shadows beyond, a voice called her name. Not the one she bore now, but another. A name she had not yet been given, one she would not earn until every war had ended. It was the same name the tower had whispered. The vision wavered. The black void folded in on itself, replaced with the smoldering heat of the plaza. Astra staggered back as the crack in the glass sealed itself without sound. Her breathing was sharp in her ears. She had felt the weight of that moment, not as a dream, but as something inevitable. And if it was inevitable, then whatever she had seen was not just a battle. It was the last battle. Behind her, Kael's voice was low measured. He asked if she understood what had just happened. Astra shook her head, though the truth was she understood far too well. The tower had shown her not just a future, but the future. And in it, the name they had heard was her own. The runes brightened suddenly, flaring once before dimming to a steady glow. Somewhere beyond the plaza, something massive shifted, an echoing groan that came from deep within the earth. Dust fell from the fractured buildings around them, and the shapes in the torn sky leaned closer, their silhouettes sharper now. It was as if they had been waiting for the tower to speak, and now that it had, they were moving. The hum from the runes grew again, this time rising into a sharp pitch that set the air trembling. The ground buckled, sending waves through the glass. Beyond the plaza, the first shadow crossed into the physical world. Its arrival bent gravity and sound, turning the very air into a weapon. They were out of time. Astra stepped back from the tower, her gaze locked on the shapes emerging. Whatever the tower had summoned, it had been a beacon, and now the hunters had arrived. Chapter 4: Fractured Horizons. The wind tore across the shattered plaza, carrying ash and the tang of ozone. It was not a natural wind, nor the residue of flame. It was the echo of something that had never been alive, yet moved with intent. Astra stood at the edge, cloak whipping behind her, eyes fixed on the horizon where the remnants of the tower glimmered faintly under the fractured sky. The first stars were burning out above them, tiny pinpricks swallowed by violet rifts that arced and folded like silk caught in a storm. Each ripple in the sky seemed to whisper, carrying warnings and promises both, intertwining them until they were indistinguishable. Kael moved beside her, silent, his usual confident stride subdued. He understood, as she did, that the world they had known no longer existed. Behind them, the city lay in ruins, its towers splintered into jagged shards that glowed faintly from residual energy. The plaza, though cracked and littered with debris, was a meeting point, a crossroads of fate. Here, the forces they had disturbed would converge, whether they were ready or not. Mirasolin's voice crackled through the comlink, hesitant. Sensors are picking up more anomalies. They're not just in this sector, They're appearing across multiple systems simultaneously. It's spreading. Astra's pulse tightened. Spreading. That was the word that carried the weight of everything they had seen in the tower's vision. Whatever the device had awakened, it was not confined to one place. It was alive, and it was reaching. Kael nodded grimly. We'll need to move fast. If the rifts are opening elsewhere, it won't just be our city at risk. Entire systems could collapse before we even understand what we're facing. The crew assembled quickly, their movements sharp, rehearsed, but underscored with tension. Veterans of previous battles, they were no strangers to danger. Yet even they paused when the sky above twisted unnaturally, shadows peeling off the rifts and stretching toward the ground like black water. Astra stepped forward, placing her hand on a shard of obsidian. She could feel the vibration, subtle yet insistent. The tower's energy had not vanished. It had fractured, scattering itself through space and time like seeds carried on a wind they could neither see nor touch. Whatever's coming, she said, voice low, it's not just an enemy we can fight. It's a force that bends everything. Our technology, our minds, even reality itself. A sudden shudder ran through the plaza. The air thickened, shimmering, as if reality itself were undulating. Kael's hand went to Astra's shoulder, steadying her. Myra's scans lit up with alerts. Energy spikes, dimensional fluctuations, gravitational anomalies. The first manifestation appeared without warning. A shard of the rift detached, spinning and twisting as it descended from the sky. It was crystalline, jagged, and filled with a light that was neither warm nor cold. It hummed, resonating in a frequency that shook the teeth and bones. The team moved as one. Shields rose, energy weapons primed, but the shard did not attack. It hovered, pulsing as if sensing them. Astra felt her heartbeat match its rhythm, an unnerving, intimate connection. Don't touch it, Kael warned. Whatever that is, it's not just debris. It's a fragment of what we disturbed. Myra's fingers danced across her console. I'm detecting patterns. It's like it's trying to communicate, but not in any way we understand. The shard pulsed again, and images flashed through Astra's mind. Worlds destroyed, ships burning, her own reflection older, marked by war and burden. She staggered, struggling to keep the images separate from reality. Each vision carried weight, each one a warning she could not ignore. Kael grabbed her arm. Focus. We can't get lost in it. Slowly, the shard descended closer, revealing etchings across its surface, ancient symbols like the ones they had seen in the tower, but more intricate, more alien. They glowed faintly, the light rippling like water. Astra realized it was forming a pattern, a map perhaps, but one that shifted every time she tried to comprehend it fully. We need to understand what this is before more appear, she said. If these shards are fragments of the same force, the more that gather, the harder it will be to contain. The ground shook violently. From the horizon, the rifts began to widen, and more fragments rained down. Some crashed into buildings, tearing through metal and stone with little regard for structural integrity. Others hovered, observing, pulsing, resonating with the same haunting frequency that had unsettled Astra. Astra, Kael, and the team fought to stabilize the plaza, guiding civilians to safety, intercepting falling fragments with energy fields. Each fragment carried the echo of a different world, a different tragedy. One carried the scent of ash and smoke, another the metallic tang of ozone, and another the subtle warmth of an ocean that no longer existed. Mira shouted an alert. Kael, you need to see this. One of the fragments, it's opening a doorway. A portal shimmered in the center of the plaza. Light bent unnaturally, forming a circular rift that revealed a fragment of another place entirely. Forests burning under a red sun, alien skies stormed with jagged lightning, and figures moving with terrifying purpose. Kael's jaw tightened. The device isn't just fracturing reality, it's connecting it. From the portal, shadows began to emerge. Their forms were humanoid but elongated, their movements jerky and inhuman. They carried weapons that seemed forged from the very fabric of the rifts themselves. Astra's heart hammered. She recognized the shapes immediately. Not entirely, but enough to know they were tied to the star-forged legacy, to the warnings of the Ascendants, and to the visions she had glimpsed in the tower. The first shadow stepped fully through the portal, its eyes glowing with an inner fire that seemed to peer directly into her soul. Its voice was not spoken but felt, a vibration that resonated in her chest. You cannot stop what has begun. The team fired, energy bolts striking the creature, but it moved with impossible speed, shifting in and out of phase with reality. Each strike passed through it, as if it were only partially present. Kael barked orders, coordinating a defensive perimeter. Hold the line. Protect the civilians. Astra focused on the shard before her, feeling it pulse in resonance with the portal. The connection was undeniable. Whatever power had fractured the tower, it was using these shards to anchor its influence in this world. And the shadows, they were drawn to it, bound by the same force. She understood then what the tower had been showing her. The fragments were both a warning and a guide, and the shadows were harbingers of what would come if they failed. As the portal grew larger, more shadows pouring through, Astra clenched her fists. She could feel the weight of every world that had been touched, every life that had been lost. And deep in the marrow of her bones, she knew that the first premonition of the final conflict, the one hinted in the tower, was unfolding here now. The sky above twisted further, rifts widening into jagged fissures of violet and azure. The fragments hummed in chorus, and the shadows advanced relentlessly. Astra took a deep breath, feeling Kael's hand on her shoulder, grounding her. The team was ready, or as ready as they could be. And in that instant, a new realization struck her. The battle they fought here would not only determine the fate of their city or their system. It would echo across the fractured worlds, a prelude to the final reckoning that awaited them in the shadows of the star-forged legacy. The first wave of shadows lunged, and the plaza erupted into chaos. Chapter 5: Veins of the Rift. The air smelled of ozone and scorched metal, the residue of the first wave of shadows still clinging to the plaza like smoke from a dying fire. Fragments of reality hung suspended, twisting and shimmering in the fractured sky. Astra moved with purpose, every step careful as the ground beneath her trembled with the aftershocks of the rift's energy. Kael followed closely, his gaze scanning the widening fissures above. The first premonition they had glimpsed in the tower's vision lingered his mind. The distant screams of worlds collapsing, ships torn apart by unseen forces, entire civilizations erased before their eyes. The fragments weren't just debris. They were threads connecting the fabric of the galaxy itself. Mira Solin's voice crackled urgently through the calm, another anomaly detected. It's different this time, localized, concentrated energy, almost like it's being drawn to something. Astra's heart skipped a beat. To the shards, she said, gesturing to the glowing fragment hovering in the center of the plaza. Its hum resonated faintly with her own pulse, a reminder of the power they had unwittingly unleashed. They navigated through the wreckage, shielding civilians with energy fields while the shards seemed to respond to their presence. One fragment tilted, sending a ripple of golden light across the plaza that warped the air and made the shadows shimmer. Astra reached out instinctively, feeling a connection stronger than before, a thread pulling her forward toward the heart of the rift. Kael's voice was sharp, careful. They were taller, faster, their movements almost serpentine, and they carried the unmistakable aura of intelligence. Astra recognized the echoes of the star-forged design, the same signature that had marked the artifact in the tower. The first shadow lunged, its elongated limbs slicing through the air with unnatural speed. Kael intercepted it with a burst of energy, forcing it back, but the creature twisted around him, phasing partially into the next reality before striking again. Each movement seemed to bend space, and Astra realized with a chill that the shadows were learning, adapting, evolving with every encounter. Myra's scans flashed. Astra, the shards, they're aligning. Energy readings indicate they're creating a network, a lattice connecting the rifts. If this continues, the entire sector could destabilize. Astra's mind raced. She could see the lattice forming in her mind's eye. Threads of light connecting each fragment, pulsing with power, feeding into the rifts and anchoring the shadows. The device in the tower had fractured reality, but now it was orchestrating its own expansion, growing stronger with every interaction. Kael's hand gripped her shoulder. We need to disrupt it before it completes the network. If the lattice stabilizes, nothing we do here will matter. The shadows surged, and Astra's team fought with coordinated precision, energy beams cutting through the void, shields holding, yet the sheer force of the rift's power threatened to overwhelm them. One fragment quivered violently, then split, sending shards of pure energy streaking outward, impacting both the team and the shadows alike. The plaza lit with molten light, flashes of gold and crimson illuminating every corner, every shattered building, every terrified face. Astra focused, drawing on the connection she felt with the central shard. She reached out mentally, willing it to resonate differently, to shift its pulse. The shard responded, vibrating, sending waves of light cascading across the lattice. Shadows screamed, not in sound, but in the vibration of reality itself. Some faltered, others retreated, and the rifts themselves shivered, bending backward as if resisting the lattice's expansion. Kael barked orders, moving like a conductor through the chaos, directing team members, stabilizing energy fields, and striking at shadows with unerring precision. He glanced at Astra, recognizing the strain in her eyes and the power she was channeling. This was not just a battle of arms. It was a battle of connection, of will, of understanding the forces that had fractured the cosmos itself. Myra's fingers flew over her console. The lattice is unstable, but it's feeding on the shadows. If we can disrupt the balance, even partially, we could sever the rifts, or at least contain them long enough to evacuate the sector. Astra's pulse quickened. She had seen fragments of the future in her visions, glimpses of what would happen if the lattice completed its alignment. Entire star systems dissolving in a void, civilizations vanishing without trace, the Ascendant legacy undone. She could not allow that to happen, not while there was still a chance to fight. A wave of shadows surged closer, forcing Astra and Kael to step back. The central shard pulsed violently, and Astra realized that it was responding to the collective fear, the uncertainty, the tension. It was alive in a sense they had never imagined. Aware, reactive, sentient. Kael yelled, drawing a line in the plaza with his energy blade. Hold them here. Don't let them reach the lattice nodes. The battle became a whirlwind of motion, the air thick with shimmering energy, debris, and the echoes of alien cries. Astra focused on the shard, channeling her will into it, urging it to stabilize, to shift its resonance. Slowly, the lattice trembled, weakened, and the shadows began to falter, their forms flickering, incomplete. But the victory was fleeting. From the horizon, a new wave of rifts tore open, more fragments spilling into the plaza, larger, brighter, and more aggressive than before. Astra realized that the device's power was not finite. It was adaptive, responding to their every move, preparing for the next escalation. Kael's eyes met hers, grim but resolute. We're only buying time. This is far from over. Astra nodded, knowing he was right. The plaza was momentarily calm, but the lattice was still forming, the rift still active, and the shadows still lurking. The first premonition of the final battle was unfolding before them, and the second, the one hinted in the visions, loomed somewhere beyond the horizon, waiting to reveal its full horror. As the sun dipped below the fractured skyline, the shadows retreated, regrouping beyond the rifts. The shards pulsed softly, almost in warning, almost an invitation. Astra took a deep breath, realizing that the fight they had just endured was only the beginning. The Starforged legacy, the Ascendant relics, the rifts themselves, they were all part of a story far larger than any one world, any one crew or any one battle, and the next wave would not give them a second chance. Chapter 6: Fractured Horizons. The plaza had quieted, but it was the kind of quiet that pressed against the chest, an unnatural stillness between waves of chaos. The rifts shimmered on the horizon, pale threads stretching toward unknown destinies. Astra and Kael moved cautiously through the wreckage, eyes scanning for any sign of the shadow's return. Every heartbeat was measured, every step deliberate. Mira Solan's calm signal cut through the silence, low and urgent. Sensors are picking up fluctuations along the outer lattice nodes. It's not just the plaza anymore. The rifts are expanding outward in irregular patterns. Something's accelerating the convergence. Kael clenched his fists. The shards. Their network is feeding off the shadow's energy, creating a feedback loop. The lattice isn't just stabilizing, it's evolving. Astra nodded, feeling the pull of the shards in her mind. The connection had deepened overnight, and with it came a new clarity. The lattice wasn't simply a structure of energy, it was a language, an algorithm written in pure force, one that spoke of order and entropy in the same breath. She could feel it, fragment by fragment, forming patterns that hinted at what the device intended. Their pace quickened as they reached the edge of the plaza, where the largest of the newly formed shards hovered. Unlike the others, this one emitted a faint hum of intelligence, almost sentient. Astra extended her hand, and the air around her fingers shimmered, the shard reacting to her presence as though it recognized her from the visions she had glimpsed. Kael's gaze was sharp. Careful. That one isn't just a fragment. It's a node, a core component of the lattice. Touch it wrong, and we risk destabilizing everything. Astra ignored the warning for a moment, drawn to the shard's radiant pulse. She saw flashes of the future, fleets torn apart by invisible forces, entire worlds reduced to ash, and a single figure standing alone on a cliff of obsidian, gazing at a collapsing star. The premonition had been distant before, but now it unfolded with intimate clarity. She shivered, the weight of inevitability pressing down. Myra's voice cut in again. We have multiple anomalies converging at the same time. If the lattice reaches full synchronization, the rifts will become permanent. Entire systems could collapse into the void, and there's no telling what will emerge on the other side. Astra withdrew her hand, feeling the shard's energy linger like a memory burned into her skin. She turned to Kael, who was already preparing energy barriers, his expression grim but resolute. We need a plan. Fast. The first wave of shadows arrived, moving like liquid darkness across the plaza. This time they were coordinated, almost intelligent in their assault, weaving around obstacles and targeting the lattice nodes with precision. Kael intercepted several with bursts of plasma energy, his movements fluid and calculated, while Astra focused on manipulating the shards, attempting to disrupt their alignment without triggering a catastrophic feedback. Mira guided them remotely, her fingers flying over the portable console as she directed energy bursts to stabilize the lattice where needed. The nodes are reacting to the shadows differently now. Some are resisting, but others are amplifying the energy. We're walking a knife's edge. The ground shook violently as a massive fragment descended from the sky, larger than any they had encountered, its surface etched with glowing runes that pulsed in time with the lattice. It hit the plaza with a shockwave that sent debris flying, knocking the team off balance. Astra caught herself just in time, her connection to the shards flaring in response to the impact. Kael roared over the din, striking with energy blades that cut through the shadows like knives through mist. We need to isolate that fragment before it synchronizes with the lattice. Astra moved, weaving through the debris, reaching for the core of the fragment. She could feel its will, a whispering presence that resonated with the Ascendant relics they had uncovered. The visions from the tower surged back, showing her the consequences of failure. Entire star systems unraveling, fleets disintegrating, and a shadowed figure watching from the void, waiting. The premonition hit her like a hammer. One of their allies would fall today, and the loss would be pivotal. She pushed the thought aside, focusing on the immediate danger. The fragment responded to her, quivering as if considering her intentions, then pulsed violently, sending a wave of energy that disrupted several of the shadows in its vicinity. Myra's voice trembled with excitement and fear. It's working. The fragment is destabilizing the local lattice nodes, but it's temporary. You need to hold it until I can amplify the signal. Kael's energy blades carved arcs of light through the remaining shadows, each strike precise, measured, but the sheer force of the lattice threatened to overwhelm them. Astra concentrated, using her connection to the shard to weave a counterpulse, a resonance that clashed with the fragment's energy. The result was a blinding surge of light, a shockwave that rippled through the plaza and pushed the shadows back. For a brief moment, silence returned. The lattice shimmered, fractured but contained. The shards hovered in tentative equilibrium, pulsing softly as if testing the new balance. Astra felt the weight of the premonitions pressing on her. She knew this calm was only temporary. The first warning had been clear. The rifts were a living structure, adaptive, relentless, and capable of rewriting reality itself. Kael sheathed his blades, breathing heavily, sweat and grime streaking his face. We've held them off, but for how long? The lattice is learning, and I don't think it will stop with this sector. Astra's pulse quickened. She could feel the threads of the future stretching out before her, glimpses of the final conflict, the ultimate reckoning. The Ascendant relics, the shards, the star-forged legacy, they were all pieces of a puzzle far larger than they had imagined. And if they failed, the galaxy itself would become the canvas for something beyond comprehension. Myra's voice was tense, but resolute. I've managed to stabilize the fragment temporarily. It should hold long enough for us to evacuate civilians and regroup. But the rifts are growing. Everywhere I scan, I see instability, energy surges. We're running out of time. Kael's eyes met Astra's. Then we fight until we have no choice but to risk the lattice ourselves. If this power is the only thing standing between the galaxy and annihilation, then we have to master it before it masters us. Astra nodded, knowing the truth of his words. They had glimpsed the edge of eternity in the shards, and now they were teetering on its precipice. The next steps would define the fate of the galaxy, the outcome of the star-forged legacy, and the final confrontation hinted at in her visions. As they moved to assist the civilians, a sudden tremor ran through the ground. The fragments quivered, the lattice pulses synchronized into a deep, resonant hum, and the air around them thickened with energy. Astra's stomach turned as the second premonition flared in her mind, an image of the final battle, the ultimate convergence, and a face she knew would not survive the coming storm. The shadows had withdrawn, for now, but the warning was clear. The war was far from over, and the next encounter would push them all to the limits of endurance, courage, and understanding. The star-forged legacy was awakening, and the galaxy had yet to see the full scope of what it could unleash. Astra steadied herself, gripping the fragment with renewed resolve. Kael, Mira, and the remaining crew formed a protective circle around her. They would face what came next together, or fall as the first casualties in a war that had only just begun. The horizon shimmered, torn by rifts that whispered of chaos yet to come, and the shards pulsed with a power both terrifying and wondrous. The fractured horizons were only the beginning, and the final revelation was still beyond their grasp, waiting for the moment when the galaxy itself would tremble under the weight of the star-forged legacy. Chapter 7: Veil of Convergence. The stars themselves seemed to quiver as the eclipse's edge entered the outer sectors of the maelstrom. The rifts had multiplied overnight, their iridescent edges flickering with hints of unknown matter, shadows slithering across the void like living smoke. Kael and Astra stood on the observation deck, watching the chaos unfold through reinforced viewport glass, the glow of the lattice fragments reflecting across their tense faces. Myra's voice crackled over the calm but urgent. Scanning reveals that the lattice is interacting with local gravitational fields in unpredictable ways. Several sectors are experiencing partial collapses, systems destabilizing at the molecular level. Kael's jaw tightened. The fragments aren't just connected, they're converging. They're forming nodes, clusters. The Starforge device we recovered in the Citadel was never meant to be isolated. It was a seed for this. Astra's mind swirled with the images she had glimpsed in the shards. The premonitions were becoming more frequent, more vivid, like pages torn from a future that demanded attention. She shivered, feeling the pulse of the lattice through her skin, through the very air they breathed. Somewhere in the rifts, the shadows stirred, drawn toward the convergence with deliberate, patient intelligence. "Kael," she said, her voice low, "I can feel it. The fragments are aware. They're learning. Every time we stabilize one, another reacts." He nodded grimly. "Then we adapt faster. There's no room for hesitation." The crew of the Eclipse's Edge moved like a single organism, synchronized through training, instinct, and sheer necessity. Engineers, scientists, and soldiers coordinated to manage the lattice nodes while keeping a defensive perimeter around the ship. Plasma turrets flared in rapid bursts. Energy shields hummed as they absorbed the impact of minor rift discharges, and the void outside the hull rippled with interference from the growing rift network. From the bridge, Commander Kael observed a large cluster forming near a dwarf star. The energy emanating from it was intense, enough to disrupt sensors and navigation for kilometers. He turned to Astra. "We need to move closer. If we can manipulate the cluster, we might be able to direct the lattice's energy before it spreads further." Astra swallowed, knowing the risk. The closer they got, the more unstable the rifts became. The lattice's pulse was almost palpable now, vibrating through the ship, tugging at them with invisible hands. Yet the premonitions in her mind left no room for hesitation. One showed the Eclipse's Edge torn apart by unseen forces, the fragments scattering like fire across the void. The other revealed a final confrontation, an ascendant figure emerging from the rifts, wielding the full destructive potential of the lattice. Both visions demanded action. Mira guided them through the turbulence. Thrusters at maximum compensatory output. Shields reinforced along primary hull vectors. Energy nodes are fluctuating at an accelerated rate. This is not natural. Something is actively influencing the lattice. Kael's hands gripped the control console. It's the shadows. They're coordinating now, merging their influence with the nodes. As they approached the cluster, the rifts pulsed violently, streams of violet and azure light erupting from the converging shards. Space seemed to bend, folding upon itself, revealing glimpses of impossible geometries. Astra's stomach churned at the sight. Entire fleets flickered in and out of reality, caught in the lattice's rippling distortion. She could feel the remnants of worlds in those brief flashes, civilizations and stars destroyed before they ever existed. The shadows emerged from the rifts, more organized than ever. Their forms coalesced into humanoid shapes, elongated, angular, flickering as if struggling to maintain cohesion. Plasma volleys from the Eclipse's Edge struck them, only to have portions dissipate into the rifts, reforming moments later in new positions. They were a force of adaptability, relentless and intelligent. Kael barked orders. "Focus on the fragments, not the shadows. Keep them isolated from the lattice." Astra extended her connection to the fragments, feeling their resistance and intelligence. One of the larger nodes pulsed in response to her presence, almost recognizing her, almost obeying. She pushed her will into the cluster, attempting to redirect its flow, but the lattice resisted, thrumming with unyielding power. Suddenly, a massive surge erupted from the cluster, a shockwave that threw the Eclipse's Edge violently. Alarms blared, systems failing in rapid succession, and Kael fought to stabilize the ship's rotation. Myra's voice was tight with urgency. Hull integrity dropping. Multiple node discharges detected. We're on the verge of collapse. Astra dove into the surge, letting the energy of the fragment envelop her, channeling its power through her connection. She could see the lattice's hidden patterns now, its adaptive architecture responding to every input, learning, evolving. She pushed harder, forcing the nodes into temporary equilibrium, while Kael redirected all remaining energy to shields and thrusters. The effect was immediate. The rifts contracted slightly, the shadows momentarily scattered, and the cluster stabilized. But the relief was fleeting. Astra could feel the lattice's intent, its hunger for expansion, and the premonitions surged with terrifying clarity. One vision struck with particular force. Kael, standing alone on a fractured world, the lattice shards orbiting like satellites of ruin, and the shadowed adversary from the Citadel standing opposite him, wielding a power beyond comprehension. The warning was unmistakable, an outcome of failure that would leave the galaxy in flames. Myra's voice snapped her back. We're holding, but the nodes are fluctuating again. Whatever we did, it's only temporary. They're learning from us. Kael's hands tightened on the console. Then we escalate. We have to take the fight directly to the lattice core before it adapts further. We cannot allow it to learn too much, or all will be lost. Astra nodded, feeling the weight of inevitability pressing down. The fragment's pulsing energy intertwined with her own life force, tethering her to the lattice, revealing glimpses of uncharted realms and possibilities. The premonitions hinted at allies who would rise and fall in ways they could not yet comprehend. Choices made here would echo through the galaxy, shaping futures unseen. As they prepared to maneuver into the heart of the cluster, a sudden anomaly erupted ahead. A massive shard, previously unseen, descended from the rift above, spinning with deliberate intent. Energy streams lashed from it, and shadows coalesced into towering forms, blocking their approach. Kael's voice cut through the chaos, a roar over the alarms. Brace for impact. Hold the node steady, Astra, or we're done for. Astra inhaled sharply, reaching out to the shard. Its surface was etched with glowing patterns, similar to the star-forged relics, but more complex, more alive. Her connection flared, a surge of energy that seared through her mind, showing fragmented visions of a future even more devastating than before. She clenched her teeth against the intensity, forcing the shard to respond, to bend slightly away from the ship's trajectory. The eclipse's edge shuddered violently, and the rifts above the cluster pulsed with an eerie resonance. The lattice hummed, a deep, almost sentient vibration that seemed to acknowledge Astra's manipulation. But the shadows surged again, adapting instantly to her control, forming into new patterns of attack. Kael leapt into action, energy blades igniting as he struck with precision, cutting through the shadowed forms while the ship rocked under the combined forces of gravity distortion and lattice feedback. Mira coordinated defensive energy bursts, each pulse carefully calculated to reinforce weak nodes and protect critical ship systems. For a moment, everything hung in delicate balance. The cluster, the shards, the shadows, the eclipse's edge itself. Astra could feel the lattice testing them, probing for weaknesses, anticipating their next move. She pushed harder, summoning every ounce of connection she had with the fragments, willing them to bend, to stabilize, to survive. Then, the unexpected. The shard above fractured suddenly, splitting into dozens of smaller fragments, each spinning unpredictably. The energy release was immense, sending shockwaves that rattled the hull and displaced shadows across the battlefield. Astra's mind reeled with premonitions, images of allies falling, entire star systems trembling, and a final confrontation beyond the rifts that would decide the fate of all. Kael shouted over the chaos. "This is it. Hold together. We're going in. Full push to the core." The crew braced, energy surges arcing across the deck, shields straining, engines roaring as the eclipse's edge surged forward. Astra reached for the fragments, channeling their energy into a focused pulse, the lattice nodes vibrating violently in response. The rifts above and around them seemed to pause, holding in anticipation of the next moment. The shadows hesitated. The shards quivered. The future hung by a thread. And in that suspended heartbeat, Astra glimpsed the final premonition, a shadowed figure watching from the void, a power beyond comprehension stirring, waiting. The warning was unmistakable. Even if they survived this battle, the war was far from over. The veil of convergence stretched ahead, a web of energy, shadows, and shards. The eclipse's edge moved into it with determination, the crew bracing for the storm that would define not just their fate, but the fate of the galaxy itself. Chapter 8: The Ascendant Threshold. The eclipse's edge plunged deeper into the core of the Maelstrom cluster, its hull rattling with each pulse of the converging lattice. Streams of violet and azure light tore across the void, illuminating fragments of worlds caught mid-collapse, their surfaces etched with glowing symbols that shimmered like living runes. Astra moved among the consoles, her hands tracing patterns in the air as she synchronized her connection with the fragments, feeling their energy thrumming like a heartbeat beneath her fingers. Kael stood beside her, eyes fixed on the viewport. The shadows that had challenged them for days seemed to hesitate as the ship advanced. They were no longer mere adversaries. They were sentinels testing the crew, gauging their capacity to manipulate the lattice. The premonitions that had haunted Astra now pressed with renewed intensity, offering glimpses of possible outcomes, each more dire than the last. Myra's voice cut through the tense quiet, precise and urgent. Energy readings spike ahead. Multiple nodes are coalescing into a central mass. This is no longer a cluster. It's becoming a lattice nexus, a focal point of untapped power. If we enter without stabilizing it, the entire system could collapse. Kael's jaw tightened. Then we stabilize it. We've come too far to retreat now. Astra, guide the nodes. Keep them aligned while we push forward. The fragments responded to Astra's focus, vibrating and shifting, aligning into geometric patterns that mirror the lattice's underlying structure. She felt the pull of the central nexus, a gravitational and energetic force that seemed to defy comprehension. Her mind flickered with visions, shards of the past and glimpses of the future, showing the consequences of miscalculation, of hesitation. The fate of the galaxy was suspended on her every thought. Outside, the shadows advanced in silent, coordinated waves, their forms elongated and warped, as if sculpted from darkness itself, moving with an intelligence that rivaled the Starforged device's own awareness. Energy beams flared, striking both the lattice and the ship, yet Astra could sense the lattice absorbing and learning, adapting to each attack, bending the shadows into new configurations. Kael's hands danced across the control console. Mira reinforced the forward shields. Divert all auxiliary power to the node stabilizers. We need a stable corridor to the Nexus. The crew responded with flawless precision, a symphony of effort orchestrated against chaos. Plasma turrets fired with controlled bursts. Energy conduits rerouted power to weakened sectors, and emergency teams moved through the hull, repairing breaches in real time. The ship groaned, straining against the forces of the lattice, yet it held, pushed onward by determination and sheer will. Astra extended her consciousness further, letting the lattice's pulse merge with her own. The central nexus revealed itself in startling clarity, a sphere of condensed energy spinning with hypnotic rhythm, its surface etched with symbols that shimmered and shifted like liquid metal. Shadows clung to its surface, writhing and contorting, as if the nexus itself was alive, aware, and hostile. Her premonitions flared violently. One showed Kael and the crew engulfed in a maelstrom of lattice energy, torn apart as the nexus consumed everything. Another revealed the same scene, but with Astra channeling the fragment's power successfully, holding the nexus at bay long enough for the crew to escape, though at a cost she could not yet discern. Kael's voice broke through her thoughts. Astra, are you ready? We move in now. She swallowed, feeling the weight of inevitability. I'm ready, but the lattice knows us. It will resist. Brace yourselves for anything. The Eclipse's edge surged forward, engines screaming as they penetrated the outer edge of the Nexus. Energy arcs lanced across the ship's hull, striking the shields in jagged, unpredictable patterns. The fragments hummed in response to Astra's will, creating a buffer, a protective lattice of their own design, countering the chaos outside. Shadows lunged from the Nexus, elongated arms reaching like tendrils of living darkness. Kael led the defensive strike teams, his energy blades slicing through the nearest forms while Mira directed precision volleys of ion fire, disrupting the shadows' cohesion. Despite their efforts, some shadows merged with the lattice nodes, feeding off the energy, growing stronger, adapting faster. Astra's connection deepened. She felt the history embedded in the fragments, the remnants of worlds long destroyed, the wisdom of civilizations that had fallen to the lattice's influence, the warnings left behind by Ascendant elders. A holographic projection flickered in her mind. A figure clad in flowing robes, its face obscured, voice resonating within her consciousness. The power you face is not for mortals, the projection warned, each word echoing like a chime of distant bells. The Ascendant relics were safeguards, not weapons. Misuse will unravel the balance of existence itself. The veil between realities is thin. Beware what you awaken. The vision dissipated as swiftly as it appeared, leaving Astra with a renewed urgency. Kael, the Nexus, it's a relic. An Ascendant relic. Its purpose isn't just power. It's a test or a warning. Kael nodded grimly. Then we pass the test. Whatever it takes. The Eclipse's edge pressed deeper, the ship's trajectory weaving through the lattice nodes, carefully avoiding destabilizing the Nexus. The shadows adapted, forming barriers, launching coordinated strikes, and attempting to corral the ship into areas of maximum instability. Each move felt premeditated, as if the lattice itself was directing the opposition. Astra extended her consciousness fully, connecting every fragment in alignment with the Nexus, forming a temporary lattice bridge that pulsed with controlled energy. She could feel the strain in her body and mind, the energy nearly overwhelming her. Sweat poured down her face as her vision flickered between the reality of the ship and the shifting patterns of the lattice. Myra's voice was steady, a lifeline in the chaos. Shields at 80%. Core system stable. Node alignment holding. You're doing it, Astra. Keep it up. Kael's voice cut through the tension, commanding yet calm. Prepare the boarding teams. Once we stabilize the Nexus, we need to investigate. We need to understand what we're dealing with. The shadows surged for a final push, striking with devastating force. Astra channeled every ounce of power, the fragment's energy intertwining with her own, forming a protective shell around the ship. The lattice pulsed violently in response, the Nexus spinning faster, brighter, almost sentient in its resistance. And then, as suddenly as it began, the lattice paused. The shadows froze mid-strike, the Nexus glow stabilizing into a steady, almost serene hum. Astra drew a deep breath, feeling the weight lift slightly, though the tension in her muscles and mind remained. Kael's eyes met hers. We bought ourselves time, but this isn't over. Not by a long shot. Astra nodded, her mind racing with the premonitions yet to unfold, the warnings of the Ascendant Elder, and the fragile balance that now held the Nexus in place. The Eclipse's edge floated in the heart of the lattice, a fragile island in a sea of potential destruction, and the crew knew that the next moments would determine not just their fate, but the fate of countless worlds across the galaxy. The Ascendant threshold had been reached, the veil had been pierced, and the true test was only beginning. Chapter 9. Echoes of the Relics. The silence after the Nexus stabilized was deceptive. Within the crew of the Eclipse's edge, a tension lingered, unspoken but palpable. The lattice had paused, but its pulse still reverberated through the ship, subtle and insistent, as if marking time for something yet to come. Shadows, once aggressive and chaotic, now hovered at the periphery of the nexus, observing with patient menace, their forms undulating like living ink across the void. Kael moved through the command deck, his gaze sharp, analyzing every console, every readout. The crew worked with mechanical precision, recalibrating systems to handle the residual energy waves. He could feel the weight of leadership pressing down heavier than ever. Every decision now carried the potential to shift the fragile balance they had managed to achieve. Astra remained at the central console, hands hovering over the holographic interface, her mind still entwined with the fragments. Each pulse of the nexus resonated with memories she could not claim as her own, visions of ancient civilizations that had risen and fallen under the same shadowy weight. One fragment spoke clearly in her mind, a city of spires etched in obsidian and silver, where the Ascendant relics had first been catalogued. Another whispered of the Veilborn, their purpose long forgotten, yet encoded in the lattice's geometry. Lieutenant Mira Solon joined her, face pale but composed. "Energy readings are stabilizing," she said, "but the nexus isn't dormant. It's reactive, almost as if it recognizes us, evaluates our intentions." Kael turned sharply. "Evaluates? You mean it's sentient?" Mira nodded. "Perhaps not fully, but it has awareness. It reacts to emotional and mental states. Fear, hesitation, even determination. The relics we've encountered before, in the Citadel and the Ascendant archives, barely hinted at such capabilities. This is something entirely different." The crew processed her words in silence. The magnitude of what they faced was daunting. Every Ascendant relic they had discovered in previous campaigns had been dangerous, yes, but tangible, controllable to an extent. The lattice, and now this nexus, exceeded every measure of power they had known. It was a force that challenged comprehension, a living archive of destruction and knowledge. Kael clenched his fists, eyes narrowing. "Then we proceed with caution, but we proceed. Astra, keep the lattice aligned. Mira, continue scanning for anomalies. Every reading could be a clue to understanding its purpose." The ship moved closer to the nexus, the fragments shifting in tandem, forming a protective lattice that mirrored the patterns of the central sphere. Astra's mind reached further, sensing echoes of the relics they had encountered in past missions. The Citadel's device, the Ascendant warnings, the shattered worlds of the Maelstrom. They all resonated here, amplified and transformed. Suddenly, an alert flashed across the command interface, a surge from the ship's auxiliary sensors. Something had moved within the shadows. Not the undulating tendrils that had assailed them before, but a form more structured, more deliberate. It materialized at the edge of the nexus, coalescing into a figure humanoid, yet impossible, translucent and refracted, as if composed of the lattice's energy itself. Kael's voice was sharp. "All stations, prepare for potential contact. Shields at maximum, weapons ready, but do not engage unless provoked." The figure's presence rippled through the ship. Crew members felt an uncanny pressure, an invisible hand brushing against their minds, tugging at memories and fears. Astra's connection flared, her consciousness probing the entity. She sensed something familiar, a connection to the Ascendant relics themselves. This was no mere guardian. It was an echo, a sentient fragment of the relic's collective will. It spoke, not in words, but in images and feelings that flooded Astra's mind. Cities rising and falling, civilizations devoured by their own ambition, relics wielded and misused, universes teetering on the brink of collapse. And yet, threaded through the chaos, there were warnings and guidance, the meticulous design of entities long departed. Astra drew a deep breath, communicating back through thought, reaching for understanding. "We seek balance, not dominion," she projected. "We wish only to protect, to understand." The The figure shimmered, pausing, and for a moment, Astra felt hope. Then, the shadows around the nexus stirred violently, as though rejecting her words, testing her sincerity. Energy arcs struck the protective lattice, lancing across the ship, forcing shields to flare with renewed intensity. Kael barked commands. Reforce lateral shields. Divert power from secondary systems. Everyone brace for impact. The ship rocked violently. Alarms blared as energy slammed into the hull, rending plating and cascading through the systems. The fragments vibrated, forming a barrier around the core, holding the nexus at bay, but strain was evident. The lattice's harmony threatened to collapse. Astra forced her focus deeper, feeling the pulse of the nexus in tandem with the shadows. Visions surged again. Kael leading boarding teams through collapsing corridors, Mira deciphering encrypted patterns that could stabilize or destroy the nexus, and the relics themselves whispering of a far greater danger, one that would not manifest for years, but whose origins were rooted in the decisions made today. A strange calm settled over the command deck as the initial shockwave subsided. The figure remained, a sentinel poised between hostility and observation. Its form shifted, revealing hints of crystalline structure intertwined with dark energy. It radiated intelligence, a consciousness older than any crew member could comprehend. Mira spoke, voice low. It's communicating, Kael. Not verbally, but through resonance. I think it's giving us guidance, or testing our comprehension. Kael leaned forward. Then we pay attention. This is more than a relic. It's a teacher, a judge, and a warning. Astra, Mira, decode everything you can. Every gesture, every pulse, every fluctuation in its energy. We cannot afford to misinterpret. The figure extended an ethereal hand toward the ship, and the fragments responded instantly, aligning into intricate patterns, spinning and converging, forming an arcane lattice bridge that extended toward the nexus. Astra's mind raced, deciphering the patterns as they formed, recognizing familiar motifs from previous relics, the Citadel device, the Ascendant archives, the shattered Maelstrom nodes, but scaled to a level far beyond her previous encounters. Kael's pulse quickened as he realized the implication. It's showing us how to interface with the Nexus without destruction. This is the threshold, the point of convergence between our technology and their design. The shadows, sensing the alignment, recoiled slightly, their tendrils retreating but remaining vigilant. Energy flares illuminated the chamber, reflecting across the ship's hull in dazzling arcs of violet, gold, and azure. The crew felt the weight of history pressing upon them, the accumulated knowledge of countless civilizations distilled into a single, sentient test. Astra reached out mentally, guiding the fragments in the lattice bridge, aligning each node precisely. Her body trembled from the strain, sweat running down her face, mind teetering between exhaustion and exhilaration. She glimpsed premonitions of the future, warnings and possibilities entwined. Battles yet to come, sacrifices yet to be made, and the ultimate revelation of the relic's purpose that would define the fate of the galaxy. Kael watched as the bridge stabilized, the sentinel figure observing with unblinking attention. The crew prepared for the next phase, to board the Nexus, understand its core, and discover what lay at the heart of this ancient, sentient force. And then, a new surge of energy erupted from the Nexus, larger and more violent than any before. The ship rocked, alarms blaring, systems straining, and Astra felt a premonition ignite within her consciousness. The decisions they made here could unravel realities, or forge them anew. Kael gritted his teeth, steadying himself. Prepare for boarding. Whatever happens next, we face it together. The Eclipse's edge hung poised at the threshold of the Ascendant relic, the Nexus alive and aware, the shadows lingering like dark omens. The crew knew that once they crossed into the heart of the lattice, there would be no turning back. The Ascendant echo pulsed in response, waiting, patient, its true intent still a mystery. The galaxy held its breath. Chapter 10. The Last Ember. The storm over the blackened plains deepened into a living thing, a wall of thunder that seemed to pulse in time with the heartbeat of the dying universe. Lightning bled through the sky in jagged forks of violet fire, each strike revealing the shattered bones of once living mountains. Their peaks crumbled into dust. The air itself felt heavy, as though the planet's atmosphere resisted every breath, unwilling to let go of what life still clung to it. Far above, the sky yawned open into the fractured mouth of the veil. It writhed like torn flesh, each wound spilling the light of other realities into the void. The rift spread with a slow, dreadful inevitability, their edges glowing with molten gold, the same hue that haunted Cairo's vision since the descent into the veil's edge 3 cycles ago. That color had always meant one thing: endings. The ground shook beneath him, the vibrations resonating in the deep scars carved through the obsidian cliffs. The others moved in the shadows behind him, their silhouettes half swallowed by the storm's dust. Lyra's presence was there, steady, relentless, but her voice was distant, drowned out by the chorus of whispers only he could hear. They called to him from the rift, voices that didn't belong to this time or this world. Some were familiar, the echoes of allies long dead, while others were strangers, yet they spoke his name as if they had known him for centuries. The largest tear above them flickered with images too fragmented to hold, a star collapsing into a spiral of gold fire, a fleet of ships silhouetted against a sunless horizon, and something far larger moving in the dark between galaxies. The sight dragged his breath from his lungs. He had seen it before, once. In the final dream the oracle of the 9th moon had given him before she burned herself into the stars. A being without form, but with eyes like twin suns, and the same black crown that had haunted the periphery of every nightmare since. It was not here yet, but it would be, and when it came, the veil would not hold. The first impact tore through the cliffside like a hammer. Obsidian shards screamed through the air, cutting into armor and flesh alike. The horizon rippled, and from the dust rose a wall of metallic shadows, moving as one. The shapes resolved into soldiers, but not living ones. The Hollowborn had found them. Hundreds of them, their bodies forged from the same alloy as the chains that bound the dying gods in the outer dark. Their faces were smooth masks of silver, empty of eyes, yet somehow they saw everything. Lyra's blades hissed into the air, her stance coiled like a predator about to strike. But before she could move, the veil screamed, a sound like metal tearing under the weight of the void. The rift above them widened with a sudden violence, and something vast began to descend through it. The Hollowborn halted. Every one of them froze mid-step, heads tilting toward the sky as if even they feared what came next. Through the rupture spilled rivers of molten gold, flowing upward and downward at once. And within that light, movement. A single, massive silhouette unfurled, its form fluid and shifting, yet anchored by wings so vast they blotted out half the storm. Its face was obscured in the glare, but 2 points of white fire burned through, eyes fixed directly on Cairo. The whispers turned to a roar. He could hear the words now, each one etched into his mind as if carved by a blade. You will stand here again, in the ash of your final world, and you will choose who dies. The creature's wings flexed once, and the resulting wind tore the battlefield apart. Hollowborn were flung like broken dolls. The cliffside beneath Cairo cracked in a web of glowing fault lines. Lyra reached for him, and then the ground vanished beneath them. They fell together, down into the fissure, into the molten light of the veil. The last thing Cairo saw before the rift consumed them was the creature's crown. Black iron, bound in runes older than the stars. The same crown from the vision of the final war. And then silence. Don't forget to subscribe and follow along for the next part of this epic war series.